started. All right, welcome everyone to the School of Environment and Sustainability's information session. However you've heard about us, I'm so glad that you're here. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat as we move through the presentation, but we won't be answering the questions until the end. And you can, of course, connect with us. One of the school staff will make the contact information available, so you can, of course, ask any follow-up questions. And we will also send you today's recording as well as a couple more pieces of info if that is helpful for you. So today's info session on Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment and Adaptation Action Graduate Certificate is hosted by myself, Megan Evans, Communication Specialist, and Dr. Sherry Andrews-Key, who will be the instructor for the course. Sherry, would you like to quickly unmute yourself and just let us know a little bit about who you are and why this topic is so important to you?
Yes, thank you, Megan. And to reiterate what Megan said, thanks for joining us today. It's really exciting to have you here for the launch of this new certificate. So I am an adjunct professor in the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Saskatchewan. And I actually work in the area of climate change and vulnerability, risk, adaptation, and management with different parts of the natural resource sector and land management and planning, along with communities in these areas. And so both my professional capacities, from being a land manager and practitioner myself to being an academic and researcher, have focused in this area for 20 plus years. So I'm excited to be able to be part of this wonderful new certificate and bring different experiences to it from my practice, but also from the different professionals that I've worked with through this. And I'm located in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, but I've worked in natural resource sector for all of my adult life. Started out, my dad was a horse logger. So I grew up doing that in central Ontario as a young person, and that gave me my love for the natural environment and has led me to this point. And I've worked in different sectors, from government to private industry across Canada, from coast to coast. And am pleased to be able to be here now and be part of this certificate.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry. We are so pleased to have you on board as well. So at the University of Saskatchewan, we typically open presentations with a land acknowledgement. And for myself, I'm learning more and more about land acknowledgements as I grow up as a professional. So we'll open with the USASC land acknowledgement, which is, as we gather here today, we acknowledge we are on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nation and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. So what I love about land acknowledgements is that it's a really great recognition of the space where you are and that kind of intersection of time and place. And so we know that on Treaty 6, there's been a lot of history happening here. And so the acknowledgement for me is really a way for us to be mindful about kind of where we are, what's happened here, and where we want to go and how we can do that most respectfully for everyone. Welcome to SENS. We were founded in 2007. We have 27 core faculty, 12 associates, 32 adjuncts, 4 sessional, 9 staff, a partridge in a pear tree, maybe, and 332 alumni to date. So we are small, but we are mighty. And you can see here a picture of our 2019 orientation where people were still allowed to be in close proximity. That seems like a lifetime ago, but I hope as things start to open up and we all get vaccinated, we will be able to return to that kind of camaraderie in and around campus. When you choose SENS, you become part of a dedicated community of faculty, students, and alumni who bridge multiple disciplines across the natural, physical, and social sciences, as well as humanities and engineering. Our goal is to address the most challenging environmental and sustainability issues facing humanity today. So that's just a small goal, and we're chipping away at it. We would love to have you join us on this mission because we need all the help we can get. So SENS has a history of working with community partners, whether that's for research or through our professional programs where students have the option to work with different community partners on an applied project related to their field of study. So there's a few listed here. And we are always open to more community partners. So if you are joining us from an organization and would like to see how we might work together, please get in touch with myself or Sherry or Carolyn. Any one of us would be happy to point you in the right direction for that. One last bit from me of the overview before I turn it over to Sherry. Our faculty members carry out research in a wide variety of areas that support the Sustainable Development Goals outlined by the United Nations. So there's a few of them listed here. What I love about this certificate is that it falls directly under the goal for climate action. And so I think it's really great that we're kind of starting to offer some really targeted, tangible ways to get other people working really hard on some of these issues that, as we've discussed, are really pressing, and we don't have a lot of time to waste. So with that, I will pass it over to Sherry. I'm going to stop sharing and she will pick it up with her own presentation. So please hold tight and I will be on mute. Keep your questions in the chat.
Okay, I will get this up here. Okay, I've started at the end. Well, this back. Okay. All right. Megan, can you see the screen there? Sharing
Yes,
the, okay.
I sure can.
Okay, so we are talking today about our new climate change vulnerability assessment and adaptation action certificate. So this is a graduate level certificate. It's kind of a mouthful there. We, you know, have looked at shortening that and have been calling it SIVA for short. But this certificate is an exciting venture. We wanted to look at putting a unique approach to a graduate level certificate with bringing in not only the theory and the academic pieces, but then linking them to the practice and the application for on the ground. What do managers, decision makers, practitioners really need on the ground? And this is something that a number of the people in SENS through research and then other professionals that I've worked with over the years have expressed that there's this need to bridge this gap between the science and the application. And this is something that we're focusing on doing through this certificate. So we want to look at building knowledge, along with that knowledge, building the capacity and resilience for professionals to meet the climate competencies that are, if they're not already being asked for in the workplace and the professional environment, we're also looking like this is what's coming down the line to meet these increasing challenges out there. So this is there are 3 courses in this certificate. It's a postgraduate certificate, and we are bringing concrete proven strategies that have already been put into practice within different parts of the natural resource sector and land management practices in communities, and bringing these pieces in with the academic theory to help enhance the capacity of your organization or your system to be able to better assess your vulnerability and risks to climate impacts that are happening out there and the increasing climatic uncertainty. And then how do you actually take that once you've identified those pieces and develop adaptation options? How do you adapt to these changes and this increasing climatic uncertainty that's out there? And so with those pieces in mind, we want to build that professional competency through this program with the grounded application for you to take and actually use in your planning practices, in management practices, in policy development and decision making. And so it's really marrying those academic pieces with, okay, that's great. This is the theory. How do we actually do this? How do we move to action? And that's where we really need to get to in out there in the real world when we're doing when we're faced with these challenging issues, kind of on the front lines of it. So the delivery mode for this program is going to be 100% online. And part of this process, or the reason for this, is to offer that flexibility, because we understand that a lot of you are working professionals and you can't uproot for a year to go away somewhere and do a graduate certificate or program. And this, by putting together this venue of doing this in an online method, it offers greater accessibility and flexibility for working professionals and students to be able to remain where you are and be able to access this, and also be part of this online community that we're going to be developing through this certificate. So through this program, the intake is for September 2021, this fall. And to give you an idea of the timeline here, the first course will be offered in the fall of 2021. So the exact dates are for that will be from October 2026 to December 10th. And then the second course, looking at building adaptive capacity for climate change, will be in the winter of 2022. And that will run from January 4th through to February 11th. And then the third course will be in the spring of 2022, the adaptive organization. And this will run from May 2nd to June 12th. As we mentioned before, the total units you will receive for the certificate will be 9 credit units. So each course is a value of 3 credit units, and I will be the program instructor. However, that being said, one of the unique pieces for this program is actually bringing in a number of different guest lectures from the private sector that have experience in doing adaptation and climate vulnerability assessments, that will be discussing key lessons learned, processes and strategies that they've used, and bringing in other professionals and academics that have expertise in the different areas that we're going to be working through in these courses. So looking at this certificate, the first course, Fundamentals of Climate Change Vulnerability Assessments, in this, we'll be looking at the introductory theory and background of climate change vulnerability assessments, looking at different types of assessments, and understanding that there's no one size that fits all. And how do you address that? How do you deal with finding the right assessment for your practice? for your situation, and working through the processes of vulnerability assessment and the different pieces that they have in there, looking at how to demonstrate the application and processes of these through case study, and using these grounded real world applications that have already been done out there. Through the second course, Building Adaptive Capacity for Climate Change, I'm going to look more into the theory and assessment processes of adaptive capacity. So with adaptive capacity pieces, you really want to look at, it's more looking at how is our system or our organization able to address the changes and the uncertainty in climate that are out there. And it really unpacks those key pieces of your organization or your system, and also delves into looking at how you use the results of vulnerability assessments to evaluate and monitor adaptation. And also, how do you take the climate science, the vulnerability assessment pieces and adaptation tools, and actually put these into practice in your system? How do you mainstream them? How do you build them into your existing systems, to be able to actually move to action and take that next step? And then the third course is the Climate Adaptive Organization. And in this course, look at different potential costs related to climate change vulnerabilities and adaptation to climate change in the natural resource management systems and communities. We also look at how can we build resilience within organizations through developing the business case for adaptation. Because at the end of the day, we need to be able to understand, what is this potentially going to cost us? What are some of the trade-offs there? And we delve not just into trade-offs and costs that you can put a monetary value on, but also those other pieces, like looking at the cultural and the social license pieces that are more challenging to attach fixed costs to, and look at how can we actually assess these and assess the value or the trade-off that we're having here, and come up with structured approaches to be able to do this. And then we look at exploring what are some of the policy implications in adaptation management and decision making for the organizations and different systems. And in this, we look at identifying potential challenges and barriers so that we can then identify strategies to overcome those, so that we don't let those challenges and barriers become actual obstacles to moving to action. So those are the pieces of the program in a nutshell. And I didn't want to go on too long, because I wanted to offer an opportunity to be able to have some questions there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and turn back over, and I think Megan will join back for these pieces too. But you can feel free to unmute yourself, turn off your camera if you're comfortable, and ask a question, or raise your hand, or type it in the chat box.
Sherry, just to get us started, I'm wondering if you could give us a brief list or some of the different sectors that this would be really kind of most useful to. And also kind of who can enter these sectors and what kind of tools do they need?
So for the different sectors, this actually spans across quite a variety. We're looking at sectors from the oil and gas sector, the energy sector, agriculture, into planning and development for urban and rural communities. looking at any type of parks management or land management, whether it's for conservation purposes or cultural values. Um, Also, there's a big movement too within different parts of the health sector, with looking at how climate change is affecting different communities and situations from a health perspective. Um, and then this can apply to either the private sector, or non-government agencies, or to government agencies as well. So it's quite a diversity. I know through a lot of pieces, engineering is having at different scales, whether it's in urban developments or rural developments, or engineering through the mining sector, forestry, oil and gas. This is something that they're having to address more often now, in looking to the future. How do we identify what our current vulnerabilities are and risks, but how do we look at assessing the potential future vulnerabilities so that we can become more proactive in our management and our decision making? And also, through governments and a variety of different sectors, all the sectors that I just mentioned, there's becoming increasing pressure and requirements through ESG reporting, which is environmental, social, and governance pieces, and through investments like banks coming out from Mark Carney with the Bank of Canada, who was formerly with the Bank of Canada, and the international stage. There's increasing requirements for transparency around what are organizations doing to address climate change and plan for it, and not just be reactive. And there's a movement for a more socially conscious investment. People want to know what we're investing in. And out of this, they want to know that these organizations are starting to address these issues for climate change planning, and that insurance companies, now different, especially in the natural resource sector, for insurance purposes, they're looking a lot more at the climate risks out there. And so they want proof that organizations have an idea of those risks. And so these are pieces that are going to be coming at all different angles. It's not just from that biophysical end of things on the ground, is actually what you're doing out there when you're doing, say, working in the mining sector, or doing a wildlife management plan for an oil and gas company, or energy sector, forest company. These are pieces that are coming down from other levels as well. One company that I work with, they're already being requested to have more structured ESG reporting around their plans for addressing climate vulnerabilities and risks, and what strategies are they going to use for this from their bondholders. So there's a lot of different things at play out there. And then different agencies are noticing increased costs. So communities and things dealing with some of the events, that extreme weather events and the increased severity in that, they're dealing with these increased pieces. So really, when you look at it and you look at all these parts, it really spans across a number of different natural resource sectors, different management frameworks, communities, from urban to rural, to doing coming up with strategies even from the healthcare end of things, looking at water security and food security.
That's great, Sherry. Thank you for that. we'll switch tracks a little bit into kind of the more, I guess, requirement aspects of the course. So how much would a student need to, how much time would a student need to budget to, while they're taking this certificate? How much time does a class take on top of kind of your 40-hour work week?
Let's see. So, there's a typical requirement for those of you who, are familiar with academia and university. For this to be a credit unit course, there's got to be a significant amount of rigor to it with time spent on different pieces of the course. So with the schedule, there's approximately 39 to 40 hours for each course for content delivery. And then in addition to that, there's approximately 6.5 hours per week for pieces that you will be working on to work your time through this. And that will be all in the online format that you will be able to access. Also, for each of the courses, we do have a scheduled class time, where synchronous time, where we will be live and come together. However, under the understanding that for some of you, you won't be able to attend all those sessions, and we will be recording them to make them available for you to access at other times. So each course will be offered over a 6-week time period. And during that time, there's flexibility for you to build that into your schedule to be able to complete. And then, of course, I, am in the professional workforce myself and understand some of those challenges. And so the idea is that we're here to work with you to also help with that flexibility and success as you work through the program.
That is just what I was hoping you would say. So excellent. I hope that's what everyone else wanted to hear too. DiCarlo from Maryland, who I think might be our farthest away guest, is just wondering, how much practice can students expect with conducting assessments and creating actions? Will we be confident in conducting these types of assessments at the conclusion of this program?
Yes. Short answer. That's the goal of the ultimate goal when you reach the end of this program. I've been at this for quite a long time, and every time I do this, and I work with some pretty large scale industry groups. Every time I do this, each situation is unique. So, there won't be that one size that fits all. But what we will offer you through the program, first of all, is that real application. And part of what I do is actually work through the vulnerability assessment process with you. So it's like we're our little core team and walk you through the different steps of one of the frameworks that you can use. And all vulnerability assessment frameworks have those common elements. And so we'll be working through that, but we will also be having guest lecturers that come in that have worked through this process, some with myself, some in other situations, to give you those real world pieces. So what we want to do for each course is, by the end of it, you're going to have a certain set of tools that you can add to your professional toolkit to be able to understand, not just in theory, but to have that practical piece of, okay, this is actually how we can do this on the ground. These are the tools that I can take and apply in this. So if you, are successfully completed at the end of it, that will mean that you have the tools and the skills to be able to take this out and apply it. That being said, realistically, just as I am, I continually learn as I am doing these different assessments with in different sectors. And you will find that one size does not fit all, and you will learn things as you do it over and over again. So but you will have the pieces that you need to be able to actually do this after.
And then just like anything, Sherry, I assume the more practice, the better you get, and the kind of more easily some of these things come to your fingertips.
Yeah, it's true. Once you get out there and you start doing it, it's just like anything. If you were to go through and you became a medical doctor, you did your medical degree, right? The hope is by the time you get to the end of it, you have the skills to go out there and do what you're trained to do. But when you first started, it's a new experience. Even though you've had your residency and things, it's still a new experience. It's not that I'm saying that this is like, training you to be a doctor, but what I'm trying to get across is that that's what we will be doing too. We will give you the tools that you need to be able to go out there and start doing this. And then when you get out there, as you work through it, you find your little tips and tricks that work for you and that work within your sector. So I'm not an engineer. Engineers, will approach things differently than I would. But they take the pieces, they have the tools, and they can take them and apply them in their own context. So, say if you're doing nature based and natural infrastructure work with a community, then you could take these pieces and apply them in that context.
Oh, DiCarlo has a follow-up question. There is a giant need for this across sectors, but the market is still forming, bracket reactive planning. Is there any guidance on how to locate companies, governments, and industries who need this work?
Well, there's probably, I would say, the majority out there. There's very little of this that has been done, especially with following through to the real action, the implementation, the building this in, the mainstreaming of it into systems. And there are different, sectors and groups out there that have done vulnerability or risk assessments, but not to the level of really moving to action and then building in that monitoring and evaluating of adaptation action. So how do you identify this? Well, I don't actually have to go out and actively seek it because I'm in it, I guess. And right now, the sectors, especially in the natural resource sector, this is few and far between. So a lot of times, if you're looking for different, to see if other companies or governments have done this, that need this work, a lot of times it can be just, I guess if you're looking at trying to find work to do this, it's looking at what's happening in the sectors out there and what kind of regulatory requirements those sectors have, and then contacting those individual groups and seeing if they've started to build those. I know that there's a lot of changes in regulatory requirements coming down the line for a number of different sectors right now. So you follow those pieces, and you often find like a lot of them are being just very reactive and have no plans for a real proactive approach to this at this point.
So what you're saying is it's a really great time to learn these skills and kind of be a leader in a field that's just kind of starting to realize that it's very important, and that some of these some of the things that you'll learn in the certificate will start to be kind of demanded and more part of the kind of professional world. But we're this would be kind of a bit of an early, be setting yourself up to be kind of one of the first people out of the gate.
Yes, most definitely. This is really when we look at moving from the vulnerability assessment or risk assessment piece to adaptation action, we're really in the stages of infancy in a lot of different sectors and in communities and that. And one organization I'm working with right now in BC, they did a climate adaptation plan in 2015, and they have action items and pieces. And part of what I'm doing for them, I went through their climate action plan. I said, okay, so this is really good. This is a great start. So which one of the action items, like how many of these have you actually done? And what tools did you use within your organization to implement these and mainstream them to make them part of business as usual, and not just looking at it as this climate change piece over here, but part of what we do as our business now? And the answer was none of them. And this is where a lot of places that have even like delved into the climate pieces have that they're struggling. And it's like, how do we actually move this to action? And a lot of times land managers and the practitioners, those boots on the ground people, they have to get permission from the higher ups, the decision makers, sometimes affectionately called the bean counters, to justify these actions. And so one of the really key pieces that we're giving through this program is, how do you get to that? How do you build that business case for adaptation to be able to put it into terms that the bean counters, the decision makers can understand, that they can wrap their heads around? Because as a land manager on the ground, this is the best thing to do ecologically and from a sustainability perspective. But we all know that a lot of times this can come down to, how much is this really going to cost us if we're going to do it? And so we're going to provide you with some of those tools and some real world examples from work that's being done out there in this area, which is really new in some senses. So it moves beyond that traditional risk assessment piece that often focuses with attaching costs and just really looking at the cost piece, to making it a much more holistic approach.
Thank you, Sherry. I think we have one more question here. We'll do last call for questions and then we'll wrap it up. So will this course include studying an application of risk assessment methodologies, i.e. ISO 31000, which I don't know what that is, and it sounds like a robot, but I'm sure it's not.
We will look at different risk assessment approaches like ISO and different like EMS systems that you can use in mainstreaming the adaptation actions. What we will do is look at how we can actually use those risk assessment methodologies that are already part of organizations as a tool or a vehicle for building in your vulnerability assessment pieces and your adaptation actions into those existing parts of the system. It's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about looking at what systems already have in place, how you can actually use them to build these pieces into them.
All right, Dee Campbell, did that answer everything you needed to know? We'll see if you throw anything else in the chat, but otherwise, last call for questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask. We will be emailing a copy of today's webinar to everybody who pre-registered, so watch for that later this week. It will include the info like costs and how to register. And we would really appreciate if you think this program is awesome, that you share it out with your colleagues and your own network. it's a brand new program and we're really excited to launch it. So the more the merrier, really. Once again, thank you all for being here today. And I hope you have a wonderful, oh, how do we sign up? Yeah, DeCarlo, he's here for us. So you can sign up. I'll put the admissions email in the chat.
Sorry, Megan, can I interrupt?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So because this is a brand new program, this is Carolyn, sorry, I'll put my video back on. We are just wrapping up and figuring out some last minute sort of kinks in getting the application ready to go. So once we have the answers to those questions, I'm going to provide sort of information about how to apply, where to apply, tuition, things like that. So we have all of your contact information as part of from the Eventbrite. So I will be sending that out to everyone. So we appreciate your patience as we kind of sort that last bit out.
All right. So without any further ado, I am going to end this recording and bid you all a wonderful rest of your day and week, whatever the case may be. Yeah, we'll talk again soon. I hope to see your name in the registration inbox.